Hi, this is All right, so this is the case study that we're looking at. So if you wanted to look it up yourself, you can go and get this information. All right, so some of the details for the company. Like I said, it's an unnamed company, multinational in the service sector. The application is going to be human resources, and the sponsor of the company is the vice president of global talent, and the team members are going to be from recruiting, training, compensation, and career development, and they are going to be led by a black belt for this exercise. So again, so it's just a very basic team. All these people are stakeholders in the organization, particularly for as far as employee turnover rates, but they all have different capacities and they all understand different aspects of the process. So the first thing they did was established a problem statement, and the statement basically was, to paraphrase, it was that the voluntary turnover rate was higher than they wanted it to be. So it was an average of 35%. And in some companies, this is worldwide, in some companies it was as high as 40%, or certain regions, certain divisions of the company. And the cost to replace one employee is estimated at $5,000. So you can see this is a very expensive problem. So again, that amounts to 900 employees at 5,000 employees a pop. So we're looking at over $4 million of a problem that they have to address. So the objective, set down by the sponsor, the vice president, was to get it down to 25%. So we wanted to lower that rate down to 25%, and so they were going to have a solution that was going to be over $1 million. Or save them over $1 million. So they went to the define phase. And that was one thing about this paper that you'll notice. It's written in the DMAIC process. So it follows, all the 6 steps of the DMAIC process. So the first thing they did was looked over the value stream map. They established a team charter, what they were trying to do, what the parameters of their project was. And they investigated and researched the voice of the customer and established that so that we knew what exactly it was they were concerned with. And they looked at 2 years worth of data. Then they collected it through a questionnaire form by interviewing former employees. So again, this is like the voice of the customer. The questionnaire was designed to understand the reasons for leaving the company. So ranking the reasons from 1 to 5, 1 being the weakest, and 5 being the strongest reasons. So again, just a little note to yourself, I want you to try and understand what kind of data is this. So we went over different types of data, and they had them all categorized. So now it's going to be up to you to try and understand what kind of data this is, and you can understand this through chapter 5 of your textbook, the Lean Six Sigma Pocket Toolbook. Now, just going back to the actual case study, the PDF, I want you to take note that they did have a value stream map down here at the bottom of page 3. So here you can see what their value stream map. So they start off with attracting the human capital. They went to recruit, integrate, reward, develop, manage, and separate. So that's the value stream map that they started off with. And from there, they also went to the survey. So remember, there was a survey of past customers over the course of 2 years, not customers, employees who voluntarily left the company over the past 2 years. And that was the data that they were collecting. All right. So the next stage was the measure phase. So we defined the problem. We knew how many employees were leaving. We decided to, set up the team. We got the charter, and we established the voice of the customer. So now it's time to go through the measurement phase. So in the measurement phase, they explored the data and they defined their key metrics. And some of the key metrics they came up with were, to hire, the cost that it actually took to hire the employee, the amount of time it took to fill the position, the training and orientation costs, the use of performance management program, and the use of an exit interview. So all these things have some sort of cost that they had to take into account was part of this process. And they also define the word defect, meaning an employee that left voluntarily. So each individual person that removed themselves from the company was considered a defect. So this came out to their defects per million opportunities. So when they looked at the data, they found that 61.3% of their people left in the first 6 months. And the first 83%, if just looking at this as 7 to 12 month period, was within the first year, right? So then if the Pareto principle, 80-20, so 80% of the people, 83% actually, were leaving within 1 year of being in the company. 63% of that was in the first 6 months. And when they looked at the data, the reasons that they came up with were training and orientation, along with career progression. So those were some of the top reasons that were given. All right, so now we go to the analyze phase. We look at the concerns. They broke the concerns down by length of time. Again, remember, these are over a 2-year period. They were still looking at what was going on with the employees. So they broke them up into those 6-month intervals of employees, and they looked at all the reasons, in something called a painter chart. And again, so they broke down the reasons a little more granularly. And number 1 was lack of career growth, then work schedule, work duties, and compensation. You can see over here in the legend, they broke them down into 3-month intervals: 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, and then finally all the way up to 36 months plus. And if you look at it, they have the categories for why they left down here on the x-axis, from career growth to work duties, settings, management, benefits, and then this up here on the y-axis is frequencies. Okay. And from looking at that, if we still consider, the 0 to 3 and 3 to 6, that's 61%, or if we consider the 83%, we're looking at the first 4 bars of each one of these groupings. And you can see that, compensation ranks very high. And if you look at just the first 2 barring, lack of career growth is pretty significant for at least in the first 6 months, first 0 to 3 months. When you look at what was another one, the work schedule, the series schedule expectations, again, another, big bump compared to some of the others. We got, again, work duties ranks pretty high. Only thing they did where it wasn't a major problem appears to be in the benefits category. Of course, compensation was pretty high all the way around. So again, so you have this little more granular way of looking at the data. And they'll put it into a different type of chart, and I think this one might be a little easier to see. And again, you got your amount leaving in 6 months, and then, I'm putting it out in terms of the first year. Again, that's about 83%. And, the data comes out looking pretty interesting. Again, this is just during their, the earlier stages of trying to understand what's going on here. Again, I'm just looking at that 83% is trapped in that box there. And those data points, and you can see things such as compensation is still ranking very high, but that career growth, it seems to get more and more prevalent the longer people are at the company. And then from that point, you see all these other trends that seem to exacerbate itself or become worse as the longer the person is at the company. So everything seems to become more and more of of a problem. But, that's just, the way we can look at this data. So now you've got the improvement phase. So the improvement phase, what they found was they started looking at how they're going to fix it. So they started looking at this as a job satisfaction problem, figuring out, okay, if we have a job satisfaction, you got people in the first 6 months worried about career growth, people getting worse and worse on other issues as the longer at that company, they categorize everything under the umbrella of job satisfaction. So that should be getting addressed in the recruiting and orientation stage. So they're apparently looking at this as a way of controlling expectations. Thinking if they can control the expectations, then they'll deal with the dissatisfaction that a lot of the employees are feeling. So what they started doing was brainstorming, and they came up with a couple of initiatives during the brainstorming session. The first one was, a referral program, so sort of a way of sorting out employees by people who are on the job and can basically get people who are going to come into the job and that they think are going to be successful. Now, their incentive, that current employee's incentive is, they receive a $500 bonus at the first 6 months and a second $500 bonus if that employee stays 12 months. So, the whole idea is that you've been working at the company yourself. You go tell somebody that we're hiring, and from there, you can kind of temper it because you've got a built-in incentive to let them know, here's how the company works, here's what you're going to get, and hopefully the employees kind of manage the expectations for them, as well as they get their bonus, at both intervals. Second is global orientation, right? So they basically sit all the employees down and tell them about the company. They tell them about the company's mission, their vision, and what to be expected, what their goals and objectives are. They have a welcome packet. I believe they said when the employee hires on, they immediately allow them to come to a welcoming center to receive their welcome packet. And basically before they even start working at the company, before they even start their job, they have a good understanding as to what the company does, what the goals of the company are, and what's their expectations of their employees. Now, moved on to the control phase. Now, in the control phase, so the plan has been implemented, and they implemented it in a company in Europe or a division in Europe and a division in the United States. And what they found was that they were having some successes. What they used is what's known as a C chart. And you can see this in chapter 7. So if you want to read up more on the C chart, I want you to understand what the C chart does, what type of data it's appropriate with, and what you should expect, what kind of information you would expect from it. And I also want you to consider what would be a better way, or is this the best way of looking at the data? But when they use this C chart, non-conformances or of the data, what they saw over the next 2 years, during their control phase, they saw that they actually did reach their goals of 25%, and they saved $1.1 million. So some things I want you to consider. I want you to consider, number one, I've said this a couple of times, what kind of data is actually being used. Again, you remember chapter 5, that was a major thing as far as when you start collecting data. Number one, you have to understand what kind of data you're collecting and how that data should be used appropriately. Were there any issues in the method of collecting the data? We also said that from chapter 5, which, there were certain ways you could get biases in the data, certain ways you can make the data a little less appropriate, a little less acceptable. And then the last one, which kind of goes from 6 and 7, but mostly from chapter 7, is what other charting methods could have been used, or were the best methods actually being selected at the time. So again, this is Professor Cummings, and this is lecture 6, and I will talk to you soon.